Austin, good morning.
Hey, Dad, how are you?
I'm good. I'm excited about our guest today, Austin. This is going to be fun. Our journey is going to take us, Austin, to Ruston, Louisiana, and the home of Louisiana Tech football. This is where the story begins. A high school decathlete, long jump champion who never played high school football became a first-round pick, an NFL Pro Bowler, two-time College All-American, a member of the Louisiana Sports Hall of Fame. But we're going to take a look, Austin, inside the heart and mind and relationship of Team Carr, a father-son coaching combo. We're going to look at their coaching career and their spiritual journey as a player, coach, and even a pastor. This is a story about faith, family, and football. My name is Ken Karcher, and I'll be your host. And alongside me is my son, Austin Karcher. And would like to welcome Roger and John Carr as our guests to Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time. Welcome, John. Welcome, Roger.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. That was so beautiful. And thank you for having us. Thank you for having me and John. And I've been looking forward to this.
Well, we're excited to tell your story. So, Roger, we're going to start with you, and we're going to go all the way back to Seminole, Oklahoma, in Cotton Valley, Louisiana. And I'd just like to have you, for our listeners, describe your childhood. Tell us about family, maybe brothers, sisters, if you had brothers or sisters. Just what was it like growing up in the Carr home for you?
Well, Ken, my mother and father were divorced when I was a year old. I really never met my dad till I was about 16 years of age. And my mother remarried. My stepfather was a tool pusher on an oil rig in Oklahoma as oil and gas, and he worked off and had 6 rigs that he ran throughout the state of Oklahoma. So I never knew my stepdad very well at all. Had a half brother and a half sister that were 5 and 8 years younger than I was. So there was a separation there. But my name was different than them. So and when I got to the age, my mother shared with me and wanted to know if I wanted to be adopted or have their name. And of course, I was used to the Carr by then, and I said, no, I'll just stay like I am. But Ken, I grew up an athlete. I love sports from the earliest time that I can remember. Anything that rolled or you could hit or jump or any of those kind of things, I just seemed like I just fell into it. And was a pretty good athlete, but I had some wonderful coaches early on that taught me to love sports and were like father figures to me. Really, they were. And my mother was a good mother, and so I just grew up there in Oklahoma. We moved to Enid when I was in about the 3rd grade, and it was a big football place up there. It had 3 junior highs that fed it, so I just grew up there as an athlete playing sports. Now, we didn't go to church. We didn't have, we weren't Christians in our home. And I pretty much, as I grew up, had the freedom to kind of come and go. And my mother was a hairdresser. And as I say, my stepdad was gone a great deal of the time, so didn't see him. But coaches and sports was my early life.
Roger, what would you say was, as you grew up in your home, what was the big influence on your life of who you eventually became? Was there any influences from your young years?
You know, I remember Oklahoma OU football was very big then, and I'd watch football, you know, and I'd look at the players that OU had, and they ran a wishbone back then, and sometimes we'd have football gatherings in our city, and some of the OU players would come. I can't recall one just right offhand, but any of them that came once a year and did banquets for us, boy, I just thought that was the grandest of things, you know, and just to watch football and watch players. And so I just remember seeing them on TV, and the Orange Bowl I remember as a kid watching, and watching OU and Tennessee play down in the Orange Bowl, and that was about as big as it could get for me back then.
Thanks, Roger.
John, tell us in one word, how would you describe your dad?
Loving.
Awesome.
You know, whatever we were enduring, whether it's me and my brother, whether we were having good days or bad days, or whether it was involved in sports, or you know, not one time did we ever feel like we didn't have a loving dad, loving mom, loving home. Had a great support group around the house, and that'd be the one word I'd describe.
Awesome. Describe kind of your childhood and how growing up in the Carr home influenced you moving forward in your life.
I tell you, it was fun when you go back and reflect. When far back as I can remember, Dad was playing in the NFL, and we traveled, and we always had two homes. Wherever wherever he was playing, we were living there in the fall, and then we'd come home for Christmas, and we'd go to Cotton Valley, and we'd see my grandparents, and then we'd go to school in the springtime there. So you had two sets of friends, you had two places that you lived, and after a win, I got to go in the locker room, and Dad would come out. We'd go in that old hallway, me and my mom, and he'd come out and get me, and we'd go into the game and into the locker room, and boy, I could get some wristbands or whatever it was I could get, tape, and we'd be in that old apartment up in Baltimore, and I'd spat up, or Dad would throw the old ball, and I can remember neighbors, people that lived below us in the apartment coming up and banging on the door and asking Dad, would y'all stop banging on the, we were running, jumping up there and throwing balls. And so it was a great childhood growing up. And it wasn't until I got into probably late elementary school or junior high that I didn't realize that everybody's dad didn't play in the NFL. I didn't think it was anything just great and special, because that's what we did. And that's what that's the way we grew up. But I think all those moving around, from school to school and bouncing around, forced you to have a personality, forced you to have to meet people, forced you to have to get to know people. And so you couldn't be shy, because again, just because we went back to Baltimore, sometimes we'd be in a different place or a different home or a different apartment to wherever we lived in the off season. So you had to make friends, and again, we were really, really close as a family because of those things. And I can remember when Dad got traded to San Diego, I was in junior high, and this was kind of the first time I got around a group of people that really didn't think like I did. Kind of look around at different schools and go to different places, but it was a fun way of growing up, and it was like I said, it was a loving home. It was always positivity around our house, encouragement, and I couldn't ask for a better way of growing up, and the influences I had from mom, dad, and grandparents also.
Awesome.
John and Roger both. Can you think about who inspired and influenced your love for sports? And then in those early years as a young kid, did you have any dreams, maybe heroes, favorite teams?
Go ahead, John.
Well, I know for me, just like Dad said, it was coaches. I grew up there in Ruston, Louisiana, when back in junior high, once Dad retired and got back to Ruston, it was my high school coaches. I mean, we had some really, really influential guys that influenced me of wanting to coach. I knew Dad wanted to coach after he got through playing, so that was an influence. And again, I had aspirations of wanting to do exactly what he did, play in the NFL, but I couldn't run like him. I wasn't built like him. I got mom's height, and I say that, but no, but my passion for football and team was all inspired by our coaches. Had some great coaches that encouraged me, and I knew right away that I wanted to coach. And then I got into college, and collegiate coaches I had, again, same thing. I wanted to do what they did, but probably very similar to Austin. You grow up in a coaching home, and you get around good coaches, and they're influential to you, and you see what they do and the influence they had on you. And man, if you could ever do that with someone else's kids, to me, what a blessing that'd be.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Austin and Ken, let me interject this. When John was growing up, James too, of course, being a receiver, I love to catch a football, and when they came out with Nerf footballs, I thought that was the darndest thing, because you could use them when John was telling you about the apartments in Baltimore. Well, I had Nerf footballs, and I was throwing those things. We were banging off lamps and doors and windows, and you couldn't really bust up anything, but you could teach them to catch with their hands. And I see, and today even the first thing I noticed, John and them were playing last night, and they had a big receiver, Grenada did, 6'5", and he was pretty. He was good looking. He looked like a pro guy. He really did. And then I saw him try to catch a couple, and he fumbled it. So I thought, well, he's got a long way to go. But I thought about those days when we were in Baltimore, and you were in that little old apartment. There wasn't a whole lot to do, and I'd come home at night, and we had Nerf footballs. They had orange Nerf footballs, and the little ones, and I'd be throwing those things, and I wouldn't let them cradle them. I'd make them catch with their hands, reach out and catch it, and thumbs together, all those kind of things that I tried to teach them when they were little. So he didn't get my height nor my speed, but his hand-eye coordination was really, really good, and it still is. And so I attribute a lot of that to just playing catch. That's what we did, just old catch with Nerf footballs, and it started out that way. And so that was some of our early experiences that I remember. And then, of course, watching TV, football on TV. I can remember when Lance Allworth and John Hadle and the OAFL and all of that kind of stuff, George Blanda. And I go back, and the St. Louis Cardinals and all those guys, when they and the players they played. And then I had a great guy named Mickey Slaughter when I went to Louisiana Tech. I was immature and an introverted kind of guy, and he was an outgoing. And he played with the Denver Broncos for several years, and he'd coached Terry Bradshaw. So, I mean, they were throwing the football all around when I got there, just as a kid that had grown up a little bit and was a punter and a linebacker and a lineman. I mean, I didn't play receiver or anything, and didn't as your daddy said, I didn't play my junior, senior year of high school. So when I got there, I'd grown up, and Mickey Slaughter saw me running, and he said, "Man, we're going to put you out at receiver and see how you do." And 5 games into my freshman year, I started. But Mickey Slaughter was probably the influence in my life. He was a Christian. He was loud and he could be tough, but boy, could he coach. He could coach, and I just loved him. And he passed away a few years ago, but he was a great, great influence. And Terry Bradshaw will tell you the same thing. Mickey Slaughter was one of the ones that really influenced him.
Roger, it's interesting. Austin and I talk about it all the time as well. A lot of kids just aren't in the backyard anymore learning how to catch. They just don't teach the young people how to catch a ball, baseball, football, whatever. And that's such an important skill to learn. But Austin, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So John, what was your favorite story or memory of your dad's playing career?
Well, I can remember my mom and I would go early to the stadium and we would drop him off. And there was nothing to do in Baltimore after that. I guess, I don't know if it was parking passes back then or whatever, but we would go in and we'd park, and my mom and I would sit in the parking lot, and whatever time Dad had to be there, I mean, we'd be the only car there. I mean, we'd be sitting there waiting, it's 1 o'clock kickoff or noon kickoff, whatever it was. We'd be there, I don't know, Dad, 8 o'clock or something. And he'd be there and have to go through his deal, and we'd just sit in the parking lot. So Mom took snacks, and, we'd just sit in the car, and, the first time I ever ate a Rice Krispie treat, a homemade Rice Krispie treat, Mom made them. And we just sat there and ate. Well, we'd go in the stadium one game, and I'll never forget, it was one where Dad caught a touchdown, and we got to know the people that sat around us, and it was elementary school, and I can remember Dad caught it, and he went and he dunked the ball over the goalpost. And there's a clip of it if you ever Google it or whatever. There's a clip of him scoring and dunking the ball over the goalpost. And I remember seeing that clip again over and over as I was growing up. And so I would, and I don't even know if they knew it, but there was a little old door frame, and I would have that Nerf ball, and I'd run, and my goal was to try to dunk it over. I was going to be like Dad. But anyway, it was, like I said, it was some great, I love going to those games, and it's amazing. Even back then I was, you watch them play the Steelers, you watch them play the Raiders, you watch them, and he would always call me old fair weather fan, because if they got, I was always talking about, Cliff Branch or Don Stallworth or Lynn Swan. Dad, how come you can't ever beat those guys? How come you just don't cheer for the Colts? How come you don't just cheer for us? But it was something about whoever they were playing that just kind of was in awe. And I know more about the NFL back in those days than I did currently right now. I can remember all those players that Dad played with and played against, and those were my idols and people that I wanted to be like, and to meet them in the locker room and do those kind of catch balls from Burt Jones and being in the locker room with Lydell Mitchell and we went to the Orioles games and so anyway, it was, like I said, it was a fun way of growing up and great memories.
What would you guys say, looking at John, your childhood, Roger, you as the dad, what was the most memorable conversation, John, growing up or moment you had with your dad? And then, Roger, the favorite father-son memory you have of John as a kid?
Well, I'll start first. I can remember um, being at Louisiana Tech, and we had John early on there at Louisiana Tech. So I can remember when he got old enough and I'd come home from the NFL, we had football camps around Shreveport and different NFL players. There was a lot of NFL players around Shreveport in that I-20 corridor, and they'd have football camps. And so I took John from the earliest little out, put his little ball cap on and his little tennis shoes, and I'd take him to the camps with me, the football camps. And he was just a little bitty thing. And I remember looking up in the Shreveport Times one day, and after we'd been over there, and they had about 4 shots of John, and then showed him taking his hat and then it showed him with a little football, and then he throwed it away or something, and so some of the memories I had and some of the talks we had were just simply going to camps, going to those little football camps, and him walking around and looking, and then of course he got old enough to participate, but I took him when he was old enough just to go with me, and I wanted him to see and experience as much of that as he could. That's what I did, and so he loved wrestling. He'd gird himself up like a junkyard dog, and he had his and he'd jump off the back of the couch into the gun cabinet and break all the glass. I mean, there's some good stories we had about him going through his little wrestling experiences. I take him to some of the wrestling matches in Shreveport, and some of those guys, he could probably tell you all of it. I can't remember any of them, but he went through a little phase there where the wrestling was a big thing, and didn't you, John? Wasn't that a big thing?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I still follow Dusty Rhodes' account, on Twitter. He's got some promos out there.
John, do you remember a memorable conversation with Roger growing up?
I do. This one's a little more serious, and it was very, very impactful. I was in the 7th grade, and again, I was about 5'5", about 120 pounds, and the football part of it wasn't going like I was expecting. You know how it is, 5'5", 120 in the 7th grade. There's probably about 50 more guys just like you, and you're playing receiver. You're not throwing the ball much in 7th grade, and you're going through all those things. And I wasn't having very much fun. And about, I don't know, 2 or 3 games into it, I just didn't want to do it anymore. And so I just told Dad. I came in there and I said, Dad, I'm fixing to quit. And I don't like football like I thought I was going to like it. I like the part of throwing and catching and doing those kind of things as we did growing up. But now in this team oriented thing that you're doing in the practice and not getting the ball and not playing much. And, I said, maybe this just isn't for me. I'm not going to play anymore. I'm going to quit. And so he said, well, come in here. Let's talk about it. So we sat in that bed, on the corner of that bed. And it was one of those things where, John, you started this thing. You're going to finish it. You started this season. You're going to finish it. You're not going to quit. That's not what we do. You're going to get in there and you're going to work harder. And so it was one of those encouraging talks of where he said, no, you started this, you're not quitting. And it could have been very easily, he could have said, hey, John, if that's what you want to do, then go do it, but it wasn't. It was one of those conversations that, no, you started something, you're going to finish it. And I think in our house, it was one of those things like that, from not just football, it was anything. You're going to start, you're going to finish it. And it was those lessons that he and Mom did for me and my brother of just things that I don't know if the culture nowadays, those kind of things, are taught that way. And I think a lot of parents, as often as you see, probably a lot of times parents just take the easy way out now. If a kid says something or wants to do something, a lot of parents go along with it.
Absolutely.
But that one instance, he said, no, you're going to finish. And along that time, I fell back in love with it. I got to catch a couple of balls. I kept going back to work. I kept, I finally got a touchdown, and the revitalization of me wanting to play continued. And then the friendships and the bonds and the teamwork among that group of classmates I had, it took a while for us to kind of bond and do those kind of things, but at least playing allowed me to keep giving it a chance.
Yes.
And so we finished that season on, and that group of 7th graders became good 8th grade players, and we moved on and won 2 state championships with a group of 50 something seniors that stayed together. And had it not been for him just saying, as a father, that's not what we do. You're gonna finish what you started. We'll talk about this later on, but you're gonna go to practice. You're gonna have a good attitude, and we'll talk about this later. But right now in this season, you're gonna finish.
Hey, Ken, I got a quick little story. He was a grade schooler, and we lived up a little road, and it was about 100 yards to the main road that ran through Cotton Valley, and he was going to school in Minden. And so he'd get off the bus, or a lady would take him to school, and he'd get off the bus and walk down that 100 yards and then up the little hill to our house. And we'd had a talk about grades, and I said, now look, we're going to make good grades, and we're going to study. And I said, don't be bringing in any D's and F's around here. I said, maybe a C occasionally, but I said, we're going to study and make good grades. So I was trying to really influence him on and I wasn't that great of a student, but I wanted him to be. And so I said, we'll study and we'll make good grades. So I said, don't bring any D's or F's. So Undine and I were out sometimes we'd watch him get off the bus and walk this little trek. He was a little old bitty thing. And so I'd watch him walk one day, and he'd take a piece of paper and he'd just throw it away. And then he'd walk about 10 steps more. He'd take another one and just throw it away. And I thought, what? I said, Undine, what is he doing? She said, I have no idea. And so there was about a trail of about 8 or 10 papers behind him that I could see. So when he got to the house and he saw that I was watching him, I said, John, what are you doing? He said, oh, nothing. And I said, well, you're just littering the road. What are you throwing away? And he said, oh, nothing. And I said, well, let's go back and pick up the trash. Well, I went back, and there was a few D's in there, and there might have been an F or two. And he was getting rid of all those things. So he wasn't bringing them home like I told him. I said, don't bring them home. So he was just throwing them out there. And
I love it.
Yeah,
that's smart.
We had a little serious talk, I guess, about school, but he was always a good student. He really was. He studied. I never had any trouble with him at all. He was a good student in college. He studied. He made good grades. Got his master's. So I learned a few things from him about what it was.
That's awesome, John. I guess the real question before we go to high school, guys, is when you caught that first TD, did you think about trying to dunk it over the goalpost?
Well, no. I tell you, I could have. I don't really remember a lot of end zone celebrations because again we played for a coach to where if you just didn't hand that ball to that referee, that was it back then. But anyway, I'm very, very appreciative of those conversations, and there was so many more of those kind of things that were in our house to encourage us and to keep us going.
Those are great stories. So let's jump to high school, guys. And Roger, let's go back to Enid High School and just share with our listeners a little bit about your high school career, because it's definitely a non-traditional path to where you end up. So tell us a little bit about high school.
Yeah, well, I went to softball. I was a ninth grade, junior high, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, played sports, played everything you could play, and was a fairly good athlete. And then went to my sophomore there in Enid, Oklahoma. 3 big junior highs fed Enid, Oklahoma High School, and I played football. And got moved up at the end of the year onto the varsity just for an experience a little bit. There were 2 or 3 sophomores that I guess they thought might be good enough that could have just finished the year a little bit and get a taste of high school football. They were always in the playoffs. Enid High School Plainsmen, they called them. And Steve Zabel was a great. Ken Mendenhall I played with. Joe Washington. I mean, a lot of those guys, were there. And so I played football there, and then my sophomore year, and then I loved track. I was a long jumper, and I liked to long jump, and so I always did that. And so I was just content to play athletics, and I studied just enough to be eligible. I mean, I never really opened a book. I never got into the study thing, and like I said, my stepdad was gone a great deal. My mother was a hairdresser, and so I just kind of grew up there, and finally just got very lonesome. Ken, I'd come home. I had some girlfriends. I was a state decathlon champion as a sophomore, and so I was talented in some ways, but had not grown up, to be as tall as I am now, or to run as fast, but just a good athlete. And I can remember the biggest thing I can remember about my high school in that 10th grade, that sophomore year, was just being lonesome. Ken, that was that age to where, drinking you'd start to see a few kids that drink a little bit. Drugs weren't prevalent, so I never was into the drug scene or anywhere around anybody that did anything. But I had friends who were Christians, and they lived in a nice side of the town. We had moved over there and rented a home. My mother and my stepdad did, and so we lived over there where there was a lot of influential people in homes. So I ran around with a lot of wealthy kids, and we certainly weren't in that class, uh, but I was in their homes, and I could see that there was something that they had that I didn't have, and my grandparents. This is my dad's mother and dad. He was an only child. My dad was, and I was the only grandchild. And they lived in Cotton Valley, Louisiana. My grandmother and grandfather did. And they'd come see me once a year, so it was just a time that I could visit and knew that I was a Carr and that I had relatives, you know. And my grandmother would always ask me, Ken, she would say, when they got ready to, this was just an hour visit once a year, my mother would say, your grandparents are coming from Louisiana. I want you to be here at so and so time. So they'd always bring me a box of clothes and some things. And my grandmother and granddad would sit there. They were gray haired back when I could remember them. And, and my grandmother would say, well, do you go to church? She would say that every time. And I'd say, no, Grandma, we don't. And she'd kind of look down a little bit. And then it was time for them to go wherever Cotton Valley, Louisiana was. I'd never been out of the state of Oklahoma. And I will say this, Ken. I was in the ninth grade, about the ninth grade, and I was riding my bicycle down the street one day, and a man drove up in a Cadillac, and he had a pretty blonde in the car, and he looked at me, and he stopped, and I was kind of out in front of my home, the little home we rented there in Enid, and he said, what's your name? And I told him, and he said, do you know who I am? And I said, well, I'm not sure. And he said, I'm your dad. And my dad was in the restaurant and bar business in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Big, nice, good-looking guy. But I never got to know him until I moved to Louisiana. But that's pretty much what I remember. Just being an athlete and getting to a point in that sophomore year when I was just lonesome. And I walked down the street one night about 2 o'clock and looked up and saw the moon and the stars, and I was just lonesome in my spirit. And I said, Lord, I don't even know who you are, but I need help. I'm lonesome. And it wasn't but about 2 weeks I was on a bus going to Cotton Valley, Louisiana, to stay a couple of weeks with my grandparents who were Christians. And so that was kind of my little deal. And I called my grandparents. I was out one night with a group of kids, and we'd been drinking a little bit back behind a little pool hall, and that sophomore year, and I got that old lonesome feeling again, and I called my grandfather in Cotton Valley, Louisiana. I'd never talked to him on the phone, never been to his home, never been out of state Oklahoma. Called him collect at 2 o'clock in the morning, and he answered the phone. My granddad did in Cotton Valley, and I asked him would it be okay if I maybe just came to stay with him for a little while. My mother and stepdad were having some problems, and so my mother bought me a couple pair of jeans and a couple of shirts, and I got on a Trailway bus and went from Enid, Oklahoma, to Cotton Valley, Louisiana, and that's how I got my. That's what God did. God just did a miraculous thing and took me from a situation and just took me to my grandparents' home.
Thanks, Roger.
Yeah.
John, tell us a little bit about your high school experience and the sports you played, and your high school career.
Well, we again mentioned that our head coach was Jimmy Chick Childress, and he's passed on, and it was really a Louisiana legend, and probably when you start talking about coaches, the most influential. I use a lot of his little quotes still to this day. You know, they were so true back then, and they're still true today. And but like I said, we had a group of probably 50 or so guys, and it didn't matter if you were black, white, rich, poor. There was just a unique bond with the group that we had. And Brad Laird and Wes Clark and a lot of my buddies that I still talk to this day. We grew up together. We were friends and went to church together and did all those things. And I think we won sophomore, junior, and senior year. I think we lost 2 ball games, won 2 state championships.
Wow,
awesome!
And got to experience a lot. Got to play in the Superdome and state championships down in New Orleans twice. And like I said, won those 2 and I played a little bit of baseball, played a little, tried to run track my senior year, trying to see if I could get faster. Boy, I tell you, it was, um, it didn't fare too well. And I knew I'd rather, if I'm going to run, I'm going to chase something, some kind of ball. I'm not running. And that was kind of my experiences. I mean, like I said, we played whatever it was in the off season. We played the basketball team at church had basketball. So anytime there was a ball running around, we tried to stay involved with it and do it. But I still say that the coaches that we had and the friendships and the bonds and the teamwork that we had and was instilled there in Ruston, Louisiana, was you couldn't have grew up in a better place. You couldn't have surrounded yourself with a better church there. Temple Baptist Church is where we grew up in, and everything they offered and the support system that they offered kids back then, and the town and the staff and teachers, administrators, it was really influential. All of that was why I got into education at the beginning, was to teach and coach and do those things, all because of my experiences there in Ruston.
Yeah.
Let's jump to college, guys, in your college playing career. And again, Roger, I mentioned this earlier. You had somewhat of a non-traditional path. Tell our listeners a little bit about your recruiting story, because I think you end up going on a track scholarship, and all of a sudden it ends up turning into something else. But tell us a little bit about that recruiting story and how you got there.
Ken, when I got there as a sophomore, starting my junior year that summer, I moved to live with my grandparents. Cotton Valley was a Class B school. I graduated with about 20 kids, 26, I think, at the most. I had that many that almost played the position up in Enid, Oklahoma. It was a huge school. So I got to Cotton Valley, and John David Crow had grown up in Spring Hill. He was a Heisman Trophy winner. Football was very, very big in Louisiana. And I thought, well, I'd been a pretty good athlete as a sophomore in Oklahoma. Just think what I can do in Cotton Valley. In the meantime, my mother, stepdad divorced. My mother moved back to Seminole, Oklahoma, and I didn't want to go there. My grandparents took me in their little home. Granddad set me down on the couch the first time I walked into their little home, which was right across from the school in Cotton Valley, Louisiana, Cotton Valley High School. And he said, "Grandma and I want to talk to you." They hadn't had a child at home in 30-something years, my dad. And they were about ready to retire. And he said, we're going to ask you to do three things. I never will forget it. He said, number one, we go to church. He was a deacon at the First Baptist Church in Cotton Valley. He said, we'll buy you a suit. I never owned a suit. He said, we'll buy you a suit. Will you come to church with us? And I said, yes. And he said, the second thing, he said, your grandmother's going to fix the best food you've ever eaten in your life. We had never eaten as a family. I just came and go pretty much when I wanted there in Enid. And he said, she's going to put it on the table in the morning, lunch, supper time. We'll say grace. And Ken, I had no idea what he was talking about. I didn't know what grace, I didn't know what he meant. And then he said, in the third thing, he said, now this is where the rubber met the road for me at that time, at that point, because I was lost. And he said, when you mess up, you tell me the truth the very first time. He said, don't you lie to me. And I only went to stay 2 weeks. And in the meantime, my grandmother turned my bed down. I used to bite my fingernails, and she bought me a little kit to grow my, just little things that she would see that I could make an improvement. And I'd go to church with them, and I'd sit on the back pew there and at the little First Baptist Church in Cotton Valley. But all the way back in my mind, Ken, I thought, boy, I've been an athlete. And they said, well, there's a new kid that moved in. And I asked my grandparents if I could stay and live with them. They said I could. And so I thought, boy, everything's going to be rosy. I was a good athlete in Oklahoma, and just think what I can do in Cotton Valley, Louisiana. And so anyway, I got to go into school and get ready to play football, and they had an eligibility rule that said if you didn't move with your parents, you were ineligible for a year. Well, we fought that. My grandparents were legal guardians, but I couldn't play anything for a year. Couldn't do anything for a year. And for a year, and when you're 16 years of age, seems like forever when you've been an athlete all your life. And that's why you went to school. And so anyway, I was kind of a mean old guy. I fought and I was just frustrated, so frustrated. And they tried to make me the water boy, tried to help me, paid me 50 cents a day to wash the stuff, and it just tried to make me a part of it. But I just couldn't believe it. So I got kicked out of biology, got kicked out of English 3. I had 3 study halls my junior year. Wasn't studying, wasn't doing anything but getting in trouble and fighting a little bit, staying out and just messing with the wrong girls. I was the wrong guy, but it wasn't the girls. I was but that's what I was. And it would have been very easy if my grandparents would have said, this kid we can't really control or what. Let's send him back to his mother or his real dad. But they didn't. My grandfather loved the Bible, Ken, and he would open it up and he would show me where somebody had messed up in the Bible, and he would say, "If you'll give your life to Christ, that He'll help you, and He'll give you." He's the author of the second chance, my granddad said, and I saw a Christian home, Ken, for the first time in my life. I mean, I saw what it was to have a home and to say grace, as he said, to have iced tea, to have a tablecloth, to have your bed turned down at night. I mean, they spoiled me in a way. But Granddad, I mowed yards. I kept all the widow women's yards mowed, and he furnished the lawnmower and the gas and the oil. He had a beautiful shop outside. He worked as a mechanic when he wasn't working for Sun Oil Company in a refinery as an operator. So he could build anything, make anything, and he was so well balanced. I saw a Christian home for the first time. Now, I didn't embrace it all at that much, but I saw it, and I knew in my heart that it was the right thing. So that was my junior year. Couldn't do anything but other than, and Ken, I had so much pent up energy, and so I was looking in the back of a book and I saw a picture of Charles Atlas. Now Austin won't know who Charles Atlas is, probably. Ken, you might know, but
I know who he is.
Back then, he did everything isometrically, and he was in the back, and I wanted to build myself up. I had so much energy, and I've been an athlete. I couldn't do anything. So I saw that. So I'd take the nickels and dimes and things I made, and I'd send that to him. And Charles Atlas would send me little pictures and stuff about doing push-ups between chairs and in between where you go out the doors and all of this stuff. So weights wasn't a big thing. And we'd go to Shreveport about once every month to shop. My grandparents would take me to Shreveport, and I went and I saw a muscle magazine. Joe Weider was on the front, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was 16. He wasn't the guy you see in the movies. He was 16. He'd come from Austria, and I bought a copy of that, and I took it home, and I was eating that stuff. I was looking at all of that stuff, and I asked my granddad, I said, and I went out and I said, can you build me this and make me one of this? So he took all of his living room furniture, moved it out of the way. They had one of those old living rooms that had plastic on everything, and nobody ever said. He moved all that stuff out of the way, and we bought Naugahyde, we bought 1/4-inch steel, and we bought iron. We bought all kinds of stuff, and he made me weight benches and squat racks and calf machines.
Wow!
So for that whole year, 2 years that I was in Cotton Valley, I was 160 something pounds when I moved there. 6'2" and 5'8", so 160 something pounds. So I'd lift weights. I'd come in from a date. Of course, I met Undine, and she was a Christian, and I got saved. I finally come to the bottom end, Ken. I had those 3 study halls. I was making D's and F's. Ken, I wouldn't study. I wouldn't do anything. My report card looked like the furthest thing from any kind of an athlete or going to college, as you could see. And finally, when everything was taken away, I knew I was lost. I knew I was a sinner. I knew I needed help. I needed Jesus. So I walked down an aisle and gave my life to the Lord. And I really didn't know any script. I didn't know much other than I was just lost, and I needed help. And the secretary there at the church was the biology teacher in the high school that thrown me out of her class because I wouldn't study. And she said, if you'll start trying to study, we'll help you. So for the first time ever, I opened a book. In my junior year, I opened a book and began to study and memorize and lift weights. I do calf raises. Ken, I never wrapped an ankle in all my career. I never had but I did thousands and thousands of calf raises, and so to build myself up, and I'd lift weights till I couldn't. And the next morning I couldn't hardly get out of bed, But I had that energy, and so I missed being eligible to play football my senior year by half credit. I had to go to summer school just to be eligible to graduate with my senior class on time. But I got saved. I was studying. I took an ACT test. I don't know how, but I passed that thing. And my grades were I was making A's and B's and a few C's. And I missed being eligible to play football by half credit. So there I was. So to go on with it, I got eligible at midterm my senior year. Played 5 games of basketball, averaged about 30 points a game, and I was 6'2" and 5/8, weighed 189 pounds, and by then I could run a little bit and jump, and and then track season was coming up, and we didn't even have a track team. We had a few guys that went to the district track, but we didn't have a pit to jump in. Or I was sitting there in study hall, and the coach walked by and he told the lady in there in study hall, said, "I'm going to a district track meet over in Houghton, Louisiana, where Dak is at." And so anyway, he said we're going to take a few kids over there. And so I thought, well, I used to be a long jumper as a sophomore back in Oklahoma, and I was pretty good at it, so maybe I'll go. And so I asked him if he'd take me, and he said, "Well, Roger," he said, "we don't have a pit to jump in here, and the meet's Friday, and how do you expect to do anything?" I said, "Well, I'd just like to go." So I got my little uniform on, Ken, and Austin. I went to the little track meet, little Class B track meet, little district track meet in Houghton, Louisiana, and I won that thing, went 21 something. And the next week, I couldn't do anything because we didn't have a pit, but I went 22 feet, and then the state meet was after that, and I went 22.11, right at 23 something feet.
Wow!
It set a new state record in Class B. And Jim Mize, the coach, the track coach at Louisiana Tech, had been watching me. I didn't know that, but my grades were better. And he came and picked my grandparents and I up in Cotton Valley, took me to Louisiana Tech, and took me in to see Maxie Lambright, who was the head football coach, athletic director. Terry Bradshaw was the senior, and he said, and he wanted to offer me a full track scholarship. And Coach Lambright saw me, and he said, "You look like you ought to play football." Well, that's kind of how it got going. And then during PE, I'd kick a football. I'd take 6, 7 footballs and kick them. And so I punted, and I punted in the NFL some. But anyway, that's kind of how I got into. When Maxie said, "You look like you ought to play football," well, that's when Mickey Slaughter saw me, and the story went on.
That's pretty good. And I think you had a nickname back in those days, too. Is it true you were called Louisiana Lightning, huh?
Kid, I got one little quick story. When I got into we'll talk about it. When I got to pro football, Joe Namath was kind of an idol of mine. And boy, and we go up to the Jets one day, and we're playing at Shea Stadium. And Bert's throwing it, the line's blocking, and I have a great day and go over 200 and something yards and 3 touchdowns. And when it's over, I could see Joe Namath walking, towards us that the game was over. And so when he got close enough, I said, "Dadgum, he's walking. He's walking to me. He wants to meet me, And so I never met him. And so he came up to me, and it was over 1,000 yards offense that day. And he shook my hand, and he said, "You're the fastest white guy I've ever seen." And I thought, wow, And so I went in there, and I was in the locker room taking a shower, and I thought, fastest white guy. And I looked on our roster, and I was the only white receiver we had, And I looked around the NFL, and Ken, there wasn't but about half a dozen of us that were white guys that were in the NFL that were receivers, But anyway, that was just something I remembered and stuck in my mind, But I could run, and so.
Great story. Great story.
Wow.
So, John, tell us a little bit how you decided to choose to go to Louisiana Tech.
Well, originally, Dad was coaching at when I got through my senior year. Dad was at Arkansas State.
Okay.
And so I had a couple little opportunities of thinking where I could go and play, but at the same time, my goal, I always wanted to be at Louisiana Tech. I wanted to go to Louisiana Tech, but the timing of it and all that just didn't work. Dad was up there at Arkansas State, and so anyway, I took just leap of faith. We went up there, and the whole time I'm there, all I can think about is boy, I wish I could get a degree from Louisiana Tech, And so I really, that was probably the toughest time I had of my life growing up is just being up there. Really didn't know anybody, tried to make friends, and I did. I had some friends that were on the team there at Arkansas State. But after that one semester, I went in there and told Mom and Dad I'd love to go back to Louisiana Tech. I'd love to get my degree at Louisiana Tech. And I know y'all are here, and Dad, it's fun. Dad, at that time, he was the receiver coach there. And I said, but at the same time, I'd like to go to Tech. So I they said, okay, if that's what you want to do, go. So anyway, I went down to Louisiana Tech and finished there. And again, the same thing. Had some really, really influential coaches, guys I enjoyed uh, playing for and being there and doing those kind of things. And again, all it did was reestablish and re-encourage me that coaching was the path I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Joe Raymond Peace was the head coach, and he just kind of took a liking to me, and I loved his demeanor part of it. And one time Pat Tilley was the receiver coach, Bobby Slaughter was the receiver coach. You had Dan Werner, had Petey Payrow, and I mean just some guys that just
Wow.
always was encouraging to me, and ended up find a little niche. I was the holder. And
That's what I was too in college.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, the punter had just graduated, and so it was that springtime, and everybody's kind of trying to find their niche. And I'll never forget it. Chris Bonio said, "John, I've been watching." He said, "You got really good hands." He said, "Have you ever held before?" And Chris Bonio, went on and was 9-10 year kicker in the NFL, and of course he was a driven kicker. I've never, you think about specialty guys and kickers being just fluid. But Bonio was very, very driven. And he said, "John, I got to find someone I'm comfortable with," and he said, I noticed you got really good hands. He said, let's go off to the side here. So we got the deep snapper, and he told me exactly how he likes it, exactly where to lean that ball, exactly the mechanics of his steps. And I mean, he just wanted to make sure that he had the right guy, so anyway, we worked at it. He told Coach Peace, he said, "Hey, John Carr is my guy," and so there we go. And so that was kind of my niche to travel and experience those things. And again, all those things were it was an awesome experience for me.
If you can get the kickers to like you, they're going to take care of you because they want that one person they trust.
Yes, absolutely. And Chris, to this day, we're still really good friends, and still is great. He's coaching in the NFL, but he's probably as far as specialty goes, I've never seen a guy that was really more passionate and driven about his work.
Yeah. Hey, John, what was it about Louisiana Tech that drew you there, that made you want to go there so much? Was it just that your dad played there? Or?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was Dad playing there. I think it was growing up in Ruston. The community was there around Louisiana Tech. We had the history there. We'd gone to games. We grew up going to basketball games with Carl Malone there, and Kim
I
Mulkey.
didn't know he played there.
Yeah, Carl Malone played there. Kim Mulkey played there. So anytime, and Ruston's a small community to where anything that was going on Louisiana Tech wise, there was always something going on. It was baseball time. It was, they had a really good baseball team at that time. And like I said, Kim Mulkey was there. You had Carl Malone. So Tech was going through that era when we were coming up that each sport was kind of winning and had somebody to follow. And of course, I knew our history there at Louisiana Tech as well. And I enjoyed the community. And so anyway, when it got down to it, that was kind of, that was the love that I had for that place, and wanted to experience it and finish it there.
Awesome.
We're going to jump to coaching career here in a second. So Roger, you finished your pro career. You have a 10-year pro career. Obviously, a lot of highs and lows in there. You mentioned earlier that you also started to desire to coach. And so let's talk, Austin, with these guys a little bit about their coaching career.
Okay. So tell us about, what led to your decision, both of y'all, whoever wants to go first, it doesn't matter. What led to your decision to get into coaching?
Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, when as I was going through, again, one thing that I think just has been established in our conversation is all the coaches that I had were so instrumental in me. And then, of course, Dad began coaching. When Dad retired from the NFL, he started coaching. So, to the chagrin of Mom, I told her that I wanted to coach, and I think she got teary-eyed because she was hoping that we would go down another path. But at the same time, the coaches I had in high school, the coaches that I had in college, my passion and love for football, watching Dad coach, I mean, it was really in my mind, no question of doing anything else other than coaching.
Yeah.
And so when I got through at Louisiana Tech, I student taught right there at Ruston High School, and then Pat Collins, who Dad was the defensive coordinator when Dad played. long time, very, very successful collegiate coach, won a national championship. He was coaching high school football, offered me a job. So my high school coaching path started from there. So there never was ever a doubt in my mind of anything I wanted to do other than coach. I wanted to be as impactful to players as the coaches were to me. And I love competing. And to me, there was no other way to do all of that without having an opportunity to coach.
Yeah. What about you, Roger?
Well, Austin, when I was playing pro football, I had some wonderful coaches too. I had some really teachers, and one of them was a guy named Pete McCulley. Pete had been a Louisiana Tech quarterback in the 50s, and Pete was instrumental in helping develop me as a receiver, and he'd always put his hand on my back, and I was kind of introverted. Small college and that thing, getting to Baltimore, and old Pete would always say this. He'd put his hand around my shoulder there, and he'd say, "My man," he said, "My man," he said, I'm gonna put a good word in your right ear. I'm gonna pat you on the back, and I'm gonna turn you loose and let you I'd have run through a brick wall for guys like that. That's the way he coached me, and he was an old quarterback, and so Pete McCulley had that knack of, he would say, "I can take this football and put it in the Nat's ear," and so he'd take me in front of nets. And I had good hands now, but if it was that over the shoulder catch, that one right here that you get maybe maybe a few times in a year, he could put that ball time and time again right there. So, and I found out that I had that ability to throw a football, not only catch it, but I could throw it and from about 15, 20, 25 yards. I love to throw a football just like Pete McCulley threw to me. And so when I found out I could do that, and I could put guys in front of nets and do drills and work on their hands and stance and start, then I knew that that's what I was gifted to do, and I could do it. And so that's what I did. And I was able to coach and do some different things in the coaching realm. Pat Collins hired me in 1987. Stan Humphries was our quarterback. We won the national championship in my first year of college coaching. So I thought, boy, there's nothing to this, man, but I had good receivers, and I just taught them, and the most fun I ever had, even to this day. And I called plays, coordinated this and that, but being a receiver coach was something that came so natural to me and so easy for me to teach. And I love doing it. So if you had to ask me, what did you really enjoy doing, was being a receiver coach. I just enjoyed being a receiver coach and watching guys run. And to this day, Austin, if you were walking away from me, I'd be looking at how you walked. I'd watch you toe in and toe out. And that's the way I did. I watched our kids, and anything I could teach them to be better as to how they walked or jumped or those kind of things. That's what I did. So as John would say, I looked through everything in football through the eyes of a receiver. That's the way I looked at it. So when I'm telling him something on after the ball game, I'll usually start, well, the receivers are this, or maybe you need to use the flats, or maybe you need to do something, So that's my critiquing. That's what I did and enjoyed.
So let me ask both of you this. This is a question that I love to ask coaches. It's a big thing in our ministry as we work with coaches. In your case, John, the question would be is, why do you coach? And Roger, obviously, why did you coach? What would you tell someone?
Oh, I coach just for the impactful opportunities that you have on young people. I see the world in what's going on, and I do believe that football and being around men's men and coaches is maybe the last resort to having the ability to teach the lessons that you need to do. And I'm talking about everything from teamwork, being selfless, understanding what it is to be committed, the discipline it takes to do things over and over and over again, not getting bored with doing the right thing. And again, like I said, the impact that the coaches had on me, and the ability to do that again. And I love every day going in and looking at those eyes of those players that we've got. And whether it's after a win or a loss, there's so many lessons to learn along the way of teaching how to bounce back and adversity hits, how are you going to respond and react. And all those kind of situations are things that I love to sit back in the mornings and really think and reflect on the kind of words and the kind of message they need to hear that day. Because they may not be hearing that kind of thing at home. They may not be to hear the kind of things that you want to make sure they hear outside of our building. So I really, really try make sure that I'm very, very careful in what I say, and make sure that the coaches know that, hey, you never know what a kid's going through. And if a kid's 5'5", 120 thinking about quitting, you never know what he's going to end up being like. And so, be careful with the words you use. But at the same time, we've got to, we got to teach accountability. There's got to be some results for your behavior, and so there's discipline part that you gotta look and teach too. And I just think football in general is kind of that last realm of what I would call an opportunity to make sure that men become men and doing it the right way. And to me, that's kind of always been my message.
Awesome.
Well, Ken, the question to me simply would be, I didn't have a father figure in the home. My stepdad was not a part of my life. He was good to me, but I never saw him and never did. I remember one time we ran a little race around a barrel, and that's the only thing I ever remember him doing with me, that it was a father-son type thing. So if it hadn't been for coaches and a grandfather, I don't think I'd have ever made it. But I happened to run into a Mickey Slaughter, who was a Christian, who had such great skills in coaching. I ran into a Pete McCulley in the pros, who was a tremendous coach and a teacher and a Christian. So I think God put people in my path to help me, and pastors. I mean, I had some of the most wonderful pastors to listen to sit under, and even to this day, I guess the Holy Spirit just, they say old coaches are kind of like elephants. We don't forget anything, and there's certain a bit of that true. And even to that day, I had such an intense interest in the Bible and what the preachers would say. And so I was under some really good leadership and deacons and coaches. So when it came to doing something for a living, and I didn't do as much research as far as preparation as I should have done, but I went to a football camp about my senior year in college, and when I got into pro football and I'd go to football camps, I went to Joe Namath's camps up in upstate New York, camps all around the country, and I came back one time and Undine said, "Well, how'd you do?" And I said, "You know what? I enjoyed it." I said, "I had the most fun I've ever done." And she said, "Doing what?" And I said, "Teaching kids how to run routes and catch balls." I said, "I found out I said, my old boy Pete, I said, I can throw the football and put it in the gnat's ear, and I can do it." And those kids, it's like John would say, when you got a bunch of kids and you're teaching them how to run a route, or you're teaching them how to do this, and they know you're an all-pro, or they know you played, you've had some success, and their eyes are about that big around, then you've got their attention. You've got a way to witness, and that was my way. I'm convinced of all my heart that was my way to go. That was my way to make a living. That was my way to influence people and kids. I've done it. I did it better as I got older, but the Bible says that God begins to work in us, and
Yes.
He sanctifies us, and He sets us apart. So we grow and we mature and we learn things, and we pass them on. So I just thought sports was the grandest thing, and like you say, Ken, there's some highs and lows in there too.
Mm.
There's some mistakes you make along the way, and maybe some decisions you make, and who to coach for, or where to go, or jobs to take, or things you look back. And I'll give you for instance, Ted Marcher-Boda was a friend of mine, and of course I had great success under his leadership there in Baltimore. And so I coached for all those years, and I was so hard-headed wanting to do it my own little way, and in this and that. And so one time we had the coach got together before Ted passed away, and then Jimmy Irsay brought us all up to Baltimore and gave us some nice gifts and things for the early years in Baltimore. And Ted looked at me and he said, "Roger," he said, "why didn't you ever call me?" He said, "My goodness," he said, "I would have, but that was, I didn't want to call. I didn't want to." And I found out, Ken, that you have to have help to get anywhere and to do
Mm.
anything. God has to send people to help you, and so you've got to be the kind of person to receive that help and to do it. And so I think along in my life, if it was coaching or whatever, I've learned some things since then. I've asked for help at times, but I think earlier on, if there was probably a negative that I had was I didn't want to ask anybody for help, and I should have. There were a lot of
Mm.
people that can help you on your career paths and help you do what you're gifted to do, but you've got to be wise enough to understand that to ask for help, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, um, how would you say, and I don't care who answers first, but how would you say your faith has impacted your coaching philosophy or your leadership style?
Go ahead, John.
Well, I'll tell you this: as I've gotten older, it's been more inside of me than it was early on. Early on, it was a product driven me. I was interested in results. I was interested in maybe not naturally being who I was as much as what I saw. And I
Mm,
think it took time for me to grow and understand kind of who I am, and being myself. And I think a lot of times, and I talk to this about coaches too, a lot of times you at the beginning of your career, it's who you see and how to do it.
yeah.
And maybe it's not so much you as a person. You're trying to emulate someone or a coach that you've seen, and that may not naturally be who you are. And I think as I've kind of gone through my little career path of places I've been and coaches I've been around, it's took me a while to just say, "Hey, John, be who you are,"
Mm-hmm.
and not so much who you think you should be or who someone else thinks you should be. And so Austin, I've gotten better as I've gotten older, but I can sure sit here and tell you that honestly, man to man and coaches to coaches, that the faith part was never really a big instrumental part of my coaching career at the beginning.
Yeah.
And as I've gotten older and back with this age group and knowing the impact of that and some things that's gone on in your own life where where you've been in the coaching profession, you've been fired a couple times, and at the beginning of it, I never would have thought that, that I'd ever get fired, because I always consider myself going to work hard at it. I'm going to
Mm.
work hard at it, and I'm going to be attention to detail, and I'm going to be organized. I'm going to recruit. I'm going to do the things that I know you're supposed to do. I'm not going to get fired, but it
Yeah.
happened. It happened twice,
Happens
and
to
so
almost
you go through
everybody. Yeah.
you go through those kind of hardships, and you start, and it affects a lot of other things of your life,
Yep.
and when you've got kids and you've got, moving around, you got homes to sell, and if you look up and if you don't have some faith and you don't slow down, then you can get overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times the coaches that I've been in contact with or that were on staffs, there was some that struggled with that, and then luckily we had some coaches on staff to help with that. And
Mm.
and I think that you got to be able to ask for help, and you also got to watch and learn. And so I've tried, now that I've gotten older, to do that, to put faith a part of it, to have a daily talk with our players about it, and having that a little bit more. But I think until you really go through some hardships,
Mm.
uh, that you really don't see those things. You don't. It just doesn't surface like it should until you go through struggles yourself and see that you need it. And then once you see that, then I think it's a lot easier to portray that over to who needs to hear it.
Amen.
Mm.
Dad, you were saying something about struggles the other day. What was the phrase you said?
Well, I just was talking about, we talk about it in our ministry, that suffering is a part of growth. And, we think sometimes suffering is getting a cancer report or someone dying. We look at these big things. Well, suffering is going 0-4 and thinking you might lose your job, or getting fired and going home and talk to your kids, or, it's every day of life. There's suffering is a part on this world. It's going to be a part of our growth in our faith.
What about you, Roger? What is kind of, how has your faith impacted your coaching philosophy and leadership style?
Well, just being able to be around some people who were a little stronger than I was, it gave me some good advice, and to seeing their leadership, their example. I began to see it in college. I began to see it in the pros. We had a guy named Larry Moody who worked for Search Ministries, started Search Ministries, did a marvelous Bible study with us in Baltimore on Wednesday nights, and we'd all potluck. And Undine would, we had a lot of single guys that had never been to church, were not Christians, and would come, and Larry was an apologist and defender of the faith, and boy, he was so good. And I began to hang around with him and do Thursday Bible studies with him and Ken Mendenhall, some other players we had on our team, about a half a dozen, and a lot of those guys are in ministry now. And even at Louisiana Tech with Denny Duron, who was a Christian whose father was a pastor over in Shreveport. Denny was the out front Christian guy. We were 2-8 my freshman year at Louisiana Tech, and it was wild out there. And the coaches would cuss and scream, and players would fight. I mean, we didn't have anything like the 33-3 that we ended up after that. So 6 of us went in the first 3 rounds. But Denny Duron, being a Christian, and rooming with Huey Kirby, who was a pastor. So there's 6 of us now that were on that team at Louisiana Tech that are full-time ministers now. So again, it's and just listening to John say what he said, as well as he said, it makes me so proud to know that he knows that faith, if you miss that boat, it doesn't make any difference what else you catch. And so it's neat to know that people come along when God appoints them and puts them in your life, and such as a Denny Duron at Louisiana Tech, and some of those coaches, as John mentioned, and in pro football, and even there's a lot written in pro football and a lot of things said about. But I'm gonna tell you, there's a lot of Christian men in the NFL, and a lot of Christian coaches, and so.
Denny Duron's a good friend. I know him well. Him and the Booties and all those people down there are close friends of mine as well. Before we jump to family, I know that John, you and Roger and I talked the other night about it a little bit. What was it like working for your dad at East Mississippi?
Oh, now that was tough. That was tough. We both had goals of wanting to do and win. But that was the first time we looked forward to working with each other, and we had talked about it for years, and for that opportunity to happen, I don't know if we thought it was just going to jump up and be roses or what, but we went to a tough situation, and again, I think he was a lot wiser than I was from the standpoint of what we needed to do to try to do that first year of trying to recruit and get to that point. And I was wanting to go ahead and jump and throw it and do all these things. And at the time, we just weren't built for that. And so for him wanting to run the ball, me wanting to throw it, it was a show. And the staff meetings were interesting, but it was a great opportunity for us to work together. We really enjoyed it. And Ken, you remember back then, it's not the old Scooby game field that it is now.
Right.
The old one right there in the middle of the campus, and you had the 2 red brick houses back there in the back. If you made the field goal, it went in his yard. If you shanked it, it went in mine. So we lived right next door to each other too, to make it even. So even when we got away from each other, the field house, we were side by side. And then of course, Mom and then my wife Paige, they had no idea what went on at practice. Hey, you want to go over and see what your mom and dad? No, I don't want to go over there tonight. Practice or whatever else. And, well, how come you don't want to go over there? Well, I had enough of Dad today. So, but anyway, it was a good time, and we enjoyed it. And from that point on, in December, I got the Ouachita Parish head job, and so we only got to coach together 1 year. But we talk about it often. It was some fun times, some tough times, but again, it was a chance for us to work together for a while.
Awesome.
Well, let's jump to family. Roger, tell us about your wife, and then John, tell us about your wife and girls.
Well, Undine, her name's Undine, Undine, and she was I tell our people at church, she was the prettiest little cheerleader in Cotton Valley ever had, and she was a pretty little petite thing, and I met her. She was a good girl, and she was a clean girl, and she was a Christian, and she was mature, and we began to date for a couple of years, and I met her out on the football field. Believe it or not, I told you a while ago I'd take footballs and kick them during PE, and after practice or after school, I'd be out there kicking footballs. I'd again go back about the 40-yard line and turn them over and kick them. And this little girl showed up one day, and she began to bring a few of those footballs back. And I thought, boy, she's cute. And so we began to date. We began to date a little bit. So we were just best friends, and that's where we are, and we're that way today. We've been married over 50 years, and so when I went to probably the biggest mistake I ever made when I went to Louisiana Tech, I thought, gosh, we're going to have a way to make some money. So the coaches got her a job in punching meal tickets. So she'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, do breakfast and then lunch and then supper. And she was so much smarter than I was. And so really one of the mistakes is I didn't let her go through school and get a degree and be able to, I just wanted a girl who was a housewife and would be home with the kids. And when we'd go to Baltimore, Ken, she was a sweet, we'd go to Aaron's rent. We'd rent the furniture. We'd rent the apartment. She'd come in, tell me how much we were going to spend on. Back then, we didn't make all those kinds of money they make today, but it was pretty good. But anyway, she got the kids in school. She got 6-month leases on apartments. She had everything set up when I came in there, pictures on the wall, food, all that kind of stuff. So being a housewife, and today she kind of still kind of grins a little bit. People will say, "Well, what do you do?" And she'll grin. And she said, and she was probably people that have been or women that have been housewives and raised kids and did all of those kind of things. It's a job in and of itself.
Oh yeah.
And she was marvelous at it. She was and still is. Grandkids, John, James, all of them were. We got our faults like everybody else, but I tell you one thing she did was help mold us into a family, and still does that. Still does it. So.
Thanks, Roger. John?
Yeah, Bob, I met my wife. I was coaching in high school, and Paige was the bank teller at the bank. And so I'd go in there and deposit money here and there and act like I was getting a deposit slip here and there and whatever. Anyway, but she was also one of our, she was a sister-in-law of one of our other coaches. And so anyway, we kind of developed a little friendship first, and then we got married in 1999 and got 2 daughters. And so when I got from my job from Washita, I got an opportunity to go to Southern Miss with Todd Monken. He hired me at Southern Miss, and my oldest daughter, Anna, had just made junior high cheerleader there in Monroe. And I'll never forget, it was a tough conversation to go in there and tell her that, Dad's going to take another career path and we're moving. And, my wife at that time was the school bookkeeper, and Anna and Emma were both doing little cheerleading things there at the high school. And it was just our own little niche there. And to go in there and tell them we're moving, boy, Anna, she cried, and they were leaving to go to cheerleading camp like the next couple of days. And so we go down to, we moved to Petal, and we'd already moved too late for her to try out for cheerleader. And Emma was struggling because now Mom wasn't the bookkeeper at the little elementary school that she was at. And so it was a tough time. And as we kind of moved again, Anna said, Dad, I don't know what you're doing in this job and all this, but I can tell you one thing. I will never marry a football coach. I will. Well, fast forward, last year she married Caden Malone, who's a quality control coach at Western Kentucky. So he's helping with the quarterbacks. And
That's
so
how it always works.
Yeah. Wasn't going to do. She married a football coach, and then Emma, our youngest one, is an accounting finance major at the University of Alabama. She's a junior there, and so we've got 2 girls. We're empty nesting, and been married 25 years now, and enjoying this part of life. And the house that we're at right now is about a quarter of a mile from the school. So as soon as we get off of here, we'll go up, and Paige will go with me, and we'll flip the laundry. You remember those days, Ken?
Oh yeah.
I'm sure Austin maybe.
Yep.
Somebody's got the laundry today and flipping it around and trying to get the field house set back up for tomorrow and doing those kind of things. But we're enjoying it, and then Mom and Dad's got the place up in the mountains now and at Myrtle Beach. So we got my brother and his wife Corey, and they got 2 daughters. And so anyway, we all try to get together as much as we can at those 2 places and spend as much time as we can together and being encouragers and got a good tight family unit.
Well, we're going to jump to legacy, guys. This is we'll end up closing up here in a little bit, and I just want to start with you, Roger. What is the most proud moment you have of John as a coach? And when you watch John coach, what do you see?
Well, you hope to see sometimes a reflection of yourself. You put your time and labor in them, and I always say, well, you are what Jerry Clowers. One time he was a friend of mine, Jerry was, and I'd go do stuff, and I'd run across him on planes and different things. And we became good friends, and so I was watching him one time at one of his shows that he did, And he looked down and he saw a little boy, and he said, "Boy, you look like your daddy." And he said, "You know, you are what you." He had a way different. Jerry Clarence had a different way of saying things, but he said, "You are what your mother and daddy poured in you." And really, in some respects, that's true. You know, those genes, whatever they get to get it from somewhere. You know, it just whether they look like you or act like you, or hopefully they do some things. So I've always been proud of him that he's been a well balanced. My granddad was a well balanced person. You know, the Bible talks about tension and different things, and being balanced. And I've always been proud of him that he's been a good husband and a good father, and he's been balanced. And even today, I can kind of get off on a tangent a little bit about politics or some other different things, you know, and I can talk it over with him. And he's got just a neat, soft way. He's got a sweet spirit, and he's just got a good, soft way of looking at things and seeing the best in people, and his coaching reflects it. And the other night when they won 65-62, scored more points than any high school football game in the state of Mississippi ever had, and then the kids just was all around him, and it was a big victory, and being a high school head coach again, and after some disappointing, as he says, firings and different things that's happened in the college realm, of which that's where he wanted to go, and he got there, and he may go back, who knows, but to be able to go from there and then go back into high school and just take those same old faith things that you've been taught that you believe in, and listening to him again. Like, I'm as most proud of him as I've ever been, just listening to him right here. This is the first time I've ever sat and just had to listen to him talk about his faith, and about what meant a lot to him, his coaches. I knew it all, but to me, he said it so well that makes me extremely proud of him.
You know, Roger, you said something in passing that is so, I think, important and rich when you talked about, you know, it's what your parents or others pour into you. And I thought about the picture of that's our Papa. You know, that's God's love, and what he has poured into us is what comes out of us when we're coaching, when we're being in relationship with our wife or our children. And, you know, he has given us this life that just pours out of us. And I thought that was such a true statement that you had shared. So thank you for that. Austin.
How has your faith shaped who you are as a man, husband, father, and a coach? We'll start with John and then Roger.
Well, I mean, I think that's what we are. You know, I think that you know, if you're not balanced and you don't have faith, and you don't have Jesus, and you don't have the love, and you don't have that a part of your daily life, I think that's the easiest way to get off kilter. You know, and you know, and I'm not saying I'm good at it today, but I do know when I get off the tracks, I feel it, and I know it, and I know how to get back on it. And I think we can get so consumed in things that we're doing, whether it's our jobs or whether it's outside influences or whatever's going on in your day-to-day life. It's so easy to get off kilter. And I think when everything's aligned, not saying everything's going to be perfect, but you've got the ability to know to prioritize things that need to get done and doing it the right way. And for me, you know, I like to get to work early. I like to sit down. I like to have a little time to myself and think about things. And I think that, you know, to this day that, you know, whenever you've got faith part of it first, and you don't forget that, and you've got your own little special time to get your day started, and then whatever problems come down the road, you'll be able to handle them the right way if you start your day off the right way. So anyway, I try to do it, and I wasn't very good at it, and I'm still not great at it, but I have been working at it. And for me, the latter part of my career is kind of when it started. And again, I go back to the tough times that you had to go through in order for it to wake me up.
Yeah.
And I think I had to have some hard times for me to realize this is what you got to do. Mm-hmm. And I think you said it earlier, Ken. I'm not saying just disruption, but I'm saying that you had to have some things to really shake it up a little bit for you to realize that you can't go through this life by yourself. You got to have some,
Amen.
You better
Amen.
have faith, and you're going to have some struggles, and and what you think are big time struggles are just what you need to get you shaken into who you need to be and how you need to react to them.
Amen.
Mm.
What about you, Roger?
Well, there's a scripture that says faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of God. And I was so blessed that I had a grandfather who was a Christian, and I heard it from him. I heard it from coaches and throughout my career. And then I loved the Bible. It gave me just a real love for the scriptures. And the more I was around coaching and preachers, and then God set me under some wonderful pastors that I had along my journeys. And so I was called to be a minister at 58 years of age and never been to the seminary, but just an avid reader and stutter and a studier and lover of the Bible. And where I was coaching, 3 different opportunities would come up, be little places maybe, but in Scuba, for instance, we got ready to leave, and the people there at Scuba Baptist Church said, "Why don't you just stay?" They had a little change. Said, "Just stay and be our pastor, and you can coach us just like you're coaching, And so to me, that's what the coaching did for me, Austin. It gave me a way. I love people. I love working with people, and so I was just coaching them, but I was coaching them on a different level. That's to be a Christ follower, to be saved, and so I'm doing something now which I've done for 14 years. That coaching and my faith early on, and the people that all led up to it, led me to do what I'm doing now, and I enjoy it. I'm like John. I got a little office I go to. I read, study, and write and Ken, my sermons. I wish I could go up without a note, but I'm not that smart. But I take notes, and they're color coded. People say, "What are you in there coloring again?" Every yellow, red, pink, green, blue, it means something. So when I'm preaching and I see a color, I automatically know. I mean, I know, I don't have to memorize, but I know that's where it goes in the sermon. So everything I did coaching, almost everything I did helped me prepare for what I'm doing now. It really did. So
Roger,
it's been a faith journey. Yes.
let me ask you this: as a lot of people don't know, and you just mentioned you're now a pastor. With all that you've experienced in your life, if you could preach one final message, what would it be?
Well, there's an old song that says, "The old ship of Zion, the old ship of Zion, get on board, get on board. It's leaving." And it's something that I think I mentioned a while ago. No matter what you do, no matter what success, no matter what you've accumulated, no matter anything in life, if you miss Jesus Christ, you've missed everything. You've missed it all. You missed an eternity. You missed everything that He gave for His life. And so it's just to share the gospel, to share the good news. And part of that, and people will say, "Well, Pastor, I didn't go to the seminary. I didn't this, that." What you share what God has done for you. You share what Jesus has done for you. And everybody's an expert. They say, "Well, Pastor, I'm not an expert in anything." Yes, you are. You're an expert on what Jesus Christ has done for you. And how He's brought you along and gone through some of those hard times. And that's what people want to hear. They want to hear those experiences, and they want to hear it from the Bible, and it needs to be biblical. And that's what it's about to me. And
Thank you. Thank you. Before we get the final words, last thing we want to know is John and Roger, when someone encounters you, what do you want them to experience, and how do you want to be remembered?
Well, I want them to first of all know that when they talk to me, I hope they're just I'm not sitting there just giving them an answer. I want to be an encourager. I want to be a good listener. And we've got a lot of kids that come in day to day, and I told them I've got an open door policy. I want you guys to come and talk to me and share problems, and let's talk them over. And I don't want you ever to think that you don't have someone that's going to listen to you. And also, I'll take the coach hat off. I mean, I want to be a parent or a good listener, or I want you to feel like you can come see Coach Carr and talk about anything, whether it's something going on personally, whether it's spiritually, whether it's academically, whatever the case is. I want our players to feel like they can do that, and I've had several do that, and I told them that it'll stay within these walls, and I'll do all I can to help you. And so for kids to know that they can come into my office and share things and pour their hearts into you. And I've had them come in and cry, and I had no idea some of their stories, and to be able to do that and help them through things, To me, that's what it's all about. And I want to be remembered for more than just a football coach. I want to be remembered for someone that that can help through tough times and encourage. And that's what we got in this business for. That was the coaches that, it all circulates back to the coaches that impacted me. There were so many of them that helped me and encouraged me to help me do things. And I want to do the same thing. And regardless of the stature, I did it even at ULM as a receiver coach. It didn't matter if they were in their 20s or some of them had kids or whether it's this age group right now, whatever the case is, I want to make sure that they know they can come see me and we can talk through things. And it's more about them as a person and not just a player. And I want to continue having relationships with them beyond that. And I'm more proud of the phone calls I get from guys that I coached, down the road and that know that they can still call on me and I'm going to be there to listen to them. And so to me, that's what ministry is. That's what coaching is. That's what teaching is. And when you ball it all up, if I can be remembered for that, then I'm proud of what I've done.
Amen.
Thanks, John. Roger, how about you? What do you want people to experience when they encounter Roger Carr, and how do you want to be remembered?
Well, the Bible says Moses was the meekest man on the face of the earth. And when some people think that word means weak, but he was anything but weak, but he was certainly humble, and he was God's man. And we're studying Moses and the Exodus and all those things that he did. And so just to be a meek, humble person and to know that that God's brought me thus far and he's not through with us yet. And the Bible says we're going to rule and reign with him for 1,000 years. So I tell our people in the congregation, he's preparing you. Get ready. I said, one of you may be the mayor of North Myrtle Beach. I don't know what it's going to be, but God's preparing you down here for what he's going to do for you when he comes back. So let's get ready. Let's get ready. Let's grow. Let's mature. Let's fulfill what God's wanting to do with our lives. Let's be humble about it. Let's be meek about it. But let's know that hey, Jesus is alive and he's coming back. And we've got to answer, and we want to rule and reign, and we want to have an eternal existence with him. The Scripture says we can. So just to be a meek person, be a humble person.
Thank you. One of our favorite things to do is at the end, we call it final words, guys. And John, I want you to take a moment to anything you would like to say that maybe we haven't asked, or more importantly, what would you like to say to Roger? And Roger, final words to John, and then Austin, I'll close.
Well, no, Ken, I first of all, I appreciate you and Austin's friendship and what y'all are doing with this podcast. And there's so many coaches and people in roles that need help. And, we've all need encouragement. We all need, we've all gone through struggles, and for there to be a way to reach out and to touch those people that may be, like Dad said earlier, they're scared to ask for help or need help. All of us come from someone, and there's always a group of people that can help, and for you guys to do what you're doing. And not everybody comes from loving homes and got people to lean on, but you always need an outlet. And so we were when we grew up, we had that at our house, and there's a lot of people out there that didn't and could use help. And so I appreciate you guys doing what you did. And if there's anything we can do along the way, please don't hesitate to let us know. But I thank you for this opportunity for us to share our story but that's all I've got. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Roger, any final words or things you want to say to John?
Well, I just want to say to him how proud I am of him and Paige and the girls. And I'm one of the most blessed people in the world to be able to coach and then raise a son that's a coach and loves those kids. And I just think it's the grandest thing in the world. And Ken, you and Austin, thank you so much for what you do. And we go back a little bit of ways, but I tell Austin, I'll say this: your dad offered me a job one time, and one of the biggest mistakes I made is I didn't take it. And and he said something that I'll always remember. He said, "You'll know this. You'll know who you're working for." And isn't it a wonderful thing to be Christian brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ and all be in one family and one body, and we'll all be together one day in eternity, and we'll have myriads and myriads of time to be able to talk and enjoy our relationships. And it's a wonderful bond to be a Christian, isn't it? Amen.
Yes, it is.
Amen.
Austin?
Well, first off, I'm just thankful for your guys' time, and I know, John, you're in a season. We're in seasons. It's not easy, so we appreciate you coming and just taking the time to share your guys' story. I know for me, I'm just so blessed. I know, John, you've helped me out in my career, and I'm thankful for all that you've done for me personally, just the connections you've made for me. And just sitting here listening, anytime we get a father son, and then in the coaching business, it's really, I guess maybe from being a son of a coach as well, there's something special about it. Just watching how one person who is your father plays such a role in who you go to be, the passions you have, and the things that you're about, and things that we go on to teach other people. And you can just see that, Roger, how you've modeled it for your son. And John, the quote I took away from this thing was just, you got to learn how to be who you are. I mean, I think, because I know for me, that hit home for me, because it's a lot of times you try to be something else that, you feel like is expected of you. But when you do that, you tend not to be the best version of yourself. And so for me, what I took away is just, God has created us each uniquely with different gifts and different talents. And when we step in alignment to who he's created us to be and the roles that we play, that's the best thing we can share with other people. And, we're put in situations where, like this week we were blessed enough to win a football game, and last week we got crushed. So it's just like, but he's put us in these unique moments where, hey, we get to go speak truth, life, hope, in a game that we all love, and we all want to win, and we all want to be successful, and people to pat us on the backs. But eternally, we have this awesome opportunity to be who we were called to be and created to be, like you said, John. And when we do that, I think that's when, the kingdom culture takes over. And I'm just so thankful for your guys' hearts and what you do for the pockets of the world that God has placed y'all in. And thank y'all.
I sitting there listening to the three of you talk, and specifically John and Roger, and the word that comes to my mind is just a loving relationship. To hear John call Roger after every game, and Roger to be invested in what John's doing, and what a beautiful picture. And it reminds me of the picture of Papa and the incarnate Christ and the Trinity before time ever began, and the desire for a relationship with us. And to see that in a father-son, it's just such a blessing. Austin and I have been so blessed over the last year of just having the opportunity to walk in people's stories. And so we're just so grateful that both of you, who have crossed my path in many ways, and I've gotten to know both of you well over the years, is to see a faith lived out in a profession that's very difficult in a performance-based industry. So we're just grateful, John, for your story, and Roger, and for allowing us to be a part of it. And we just want to thank you for sharing your story with our listeners at Awaken Kingdom Culture, where hearts and minds come alive, one story at a time.